senior apartment building with 133 dwelling units at 1673 Hazlitt Road. Now, are we planning to take both of them at the same time or have two separate?
It's really up to you. I think it works better together.
Okay. Well, then I'll read them off together. We'll also take this in conjunction with special use permit number 19181, Hudson Senior Living, construct an independent senior apartment building over 25,000 square feet in size at 1673 Hazlitt Road.
And if I could clarify my comment, if you are considering action, which both of these there are motions and resolutions prepared, you'll need to do that separately.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
So if I could just provide a really brief update since the last meeting. Thanks. Since the last time actually since the public hearing back in December, there was a revised site plan that was provided. So the staff memo I submitted has detailed information about each of those things. I'm just going to hit the high notes here. This new plan adds 24 bicycle parking spaces, 4 motor vehicle parking spaces. It identifies a location for 23 possible future parking spaces and adds an extension of a branch of the township's interurban pathway to the plan on the west side of the property. The exact location of that pathway is yet to be determined. It's shown on the map in kind of a zigzag pattern. Our engineering department has reviewed that, and they have some comments and have actually some suggestions, but we haven't tackled that yet. But I think the important part is it's on the plan and is proposed generally in that area, which would ultimately connect to Hillbrook Park via the township eventually would install a pedestrian crossing there, much like the pathway on Okemos Road, to access Hillbrook Park, and then would connect ultimately to Lake Lansing Park South. So each of the totals for bicycle parking, motor vehicle parking are included in the staff memo. Bicycle parking, enough was added so that waiver has been eliminated. Motor vehicle parking, they added 4 spaces, and then these areas for 23 additional parking spaces. As noted in the memo, I'm not counting those towards the permanent parking on the site or to eliminate any kind of waivers. They are future spaces identified by the applicant in the future where they may build them, but not proposed for construction now. Talked about the interurban pathway. The freestanding sign has been shrunk down to meet the township's ordinance, so that would no longer require a waiver. So what we're dealing with now is 1 waiver for parking spaces. So with the additional bicycle parking spaces, they're able to reduce the required number of motor vehicle parking spaces because the ordinance allows for a small reduction for that. So now there are 256 total parking spaces required for the project. Applicants proposing 105. So a waiver is being requested for 151 parking spaces. So the Planning Commission, there is a resolution to recommend approval. This is based on discussion and feedback and direction from the Planning Commission at the public hearing. So you'll see that in your meeting packet. But the site plan and the revised sign plan are also included here for consideration. Regarding the special use permit, there's really nothing new. The total square footages remain the same as they were before. There's also a motion to recommend approval and a resolution provided. If you have any questions, I'm here. Applicant team is here as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Does someone want to make the motion, or do we want to discuss this, or how do we want to proceed?
I think it's appropriate to have the motion in front of us and
Okay.
then discuss. So I so move.
Okay. So Commissioner Primo, seconded by Commissioner Shrewsbury, makes a motion to adopt the resolution recommending approval of mixed-use plan unit development number 19034 to construct a senior apartment building with 133 dwelling units at 1673 Hazlitt Road with conditions. And Commissioner Shrewsbury seconded. Discussion. Commissioner Hendrickson.
So when we last took this up last year, I had some concerns about whether or not this actually was fitting the criteria for a mixed-use development. What the applicants put forward is a senior home. And yes, it has some amenities within it. I believe there's the salon that's open to the public. But as I took some time to reflect on this proposal further over the last few weeks, I really don't know that this meets what we envision in terms of a mixed-use development. We've seen what can happen when the right proposal comes in the Village of Okemos that we passed through last summer. That's, I think, far closer to what we should expect from a mixed-use development as it's coming in. And one of the areas that we've indicated is an area of great importance to us, right? The Village of Okemos area, the Hazlet-Pika area, these are areas that we want to be roughly similar in my estimation from a vision perspective. And so I ask myself, is this development in line with what we would expect out of a proposal like that? And I think the answer is no. And I know that when this came up for a straw poll last time around, I indicated that I would be in support of it. I did have concerns over parking as well, and those concerns remain. Adding 4 spaces is not going to move the needle for me. But I think in general, I would like to see a different kind of project. And it's not any negative statement against this particular applicant. I just think that if we're going to look for a specific kind of development in the Hazlet-Pika area, we should look for something more like what we see out of the Village of Okemos. And if we say yes to this, we're going to be stuck with this for years to come. And so I would ask, as we consider whether or not we're going to be supporting or not supporting this particular application as it comes in front of us today, is this actually what the vision is for the Hazlet, the Hazlet current area right now? I'll be voting in opposition to this project today, and I would encourage you to think about whether or not this meets with your vision for that area.
Commissioner Richards.
I have some similar concerns after I thought about this. I guess the first kind of a clue was in this whole parking requirement, or the applicant has basically said their experience is they really don't need a whole lot of parking if you consider employees and visitors. Essentially, there's not very many people that are actually going to have a vehicle. And so I guess that in itself is that's not necessarily a negative, except that if you look at the idea that this is the first project in a large parcel, okay, so ideally you would want something to go, we would want something to go in that has the ability to spin off other development. And then I think we can see, okay, so we have a number of facilities that cater to folks my age and older. And has there been any spinoff in the areas where they pretty much sit by themselves? At least my review of the different facilities that one way or another have folks that most of the people there are not using their vehicles or have a vehicle. So I have some of the same kind of concerns about will this development spur additional development? I'm excited in one sense. We waited a long time for something to happen in that spot, for sure. And I can understand have a level of excitement that it is, there is a project on the board. But then when you look at long term, which is what we should be looking at, is this the right project? And I guess I also have concerns. Is it really a mixed-use project? That's like, because certainly it doesn't have a level or a the appearances of being a commercial business that's basically has going to have a lot of walk-in traffic. I mean, basically, most of the traffic there is going to be from the building itself. And if I understand that the site plans on the computer aren't real good, but is this one big building? Okay, so again, we're looking to the west. We've got great views of a natural area. It would make a great spot for owner-occupied, residential, to look at that, have that in your backyard. So, in terms of having it part of an overall plan. So basically, I guess as I looked at this project and thought about it, particularly long-term, I guess I have some serious reservations about whether this really is mixed use, and even if it is it really a good long-term development for that parcel? And again, I'm sensitive to that it's been a long time coming to have a project there. So I guess if our economic development director wants to comment about my comments.
Go ahead. Director Buck.
Director Buck, again, Economic Development, Chris Buck. I'm a little surprised and I guess a little disappointed in the direction that this conversation is going. I look at the 10 goals that the Township Board set up for 2019, and Goal J is to explore housing options and alternatives to encourage a diverse population and targeted groups to live in the township. And then Goal C is to break ground on redevelopment of downtown Okemos and downtown Hazlet. I hold those goals as part of my responsibility, and I was pretty much hired to implement the master plan and to try to get the economic benefits of the things that the township's trying to accomplish. And so when we compare the Hazlet Village Square with the Okemos Village project, I just want to remind everybody that the Okemos Village project at $100 million is going to be on a 5-acre parcel of land. Okay, Hazlet Village Square is 28 acres in Hazlet. It's a very different demographic. If you look at the studies that we've had done and what the developer studies have had done, and I've worked 40 hours a week for almost 3 years now trying to figure out what the barriers for entry are and what the feasibility is and what the absorptions are and what type of projects are willing to be done. And the folks at the Village of Okemos have walked the Hazlet Village Square and were invited to do a development project there, and the answer was no. It's a very, very large palette to paint on as a 28-acre project. We all know the Horrocks story. That was going to be the middle chunk of that. And I think what that has done, and I'm not in a position to put words in the mouths of the investment group that owns the Hazlet Village Square, and I am certainly not in any position to make any promises on behalf of what the future is going to hold. But what I can tell you is that the Village Square is really, for the first time in a while, being marketed to development projects, including this development project. A little personal anecdote, when the Cypress team showed up at our doorstep here in the township in March of 2019, I was introduced to Jeff Buck and his team and said, we want to bring our product to the Lansing region, and Meridian Township seems like a very obvious place to go. And the Township Board and the staff made it very, very clear that I am to try to herd people towards the Hazlet Village Square and open doors. And so I drove Jeff Buck, no relation, over to the Village Square, introduced him to the team, and really fostered this development project to occur at the Village Square as what I am expecting to be phase 1 of probably a 2 or 3 phase complete redevelopment project for the Village Square. The investment group for the Hazlet Village Square, I don't think is interested in writing a bunch of checks, but I think they're willing to reinvest in this property, and I think the proceeds from the sale of a 10-acre parcel like this, and I mean, again, I want to be mindful of not sending anything proprietary, but this is the square, the unusual shaped piece here is where Cypress is proposed to go. There is a 16.5 acre parcel in the middle, and then there's a 2.5 acre parcel on the corner. And this whole area is being marketed publicly and very diligently to different development projects. So again, if I could fast forward with what I'm trying to drive to happen with all of the players that are interested in this parcel, is that we have a 3-phase complete redevelopment of Hazlet Village Square, because developers are more likely to build smaller, more likely to be successful development projects. And while a 55 and older senior housing complex being the first project that's brought to you at face value, I understand the knee-jerk reaction of how does this drive density and not density, but how does this drive vibrancy? But I don't know if we have a senior housing facility that isn't a walkable commercial grid. We just did this study that talked about a pent-up demand for housing units, and there's a very good scenario where that mixed use that you're talking about, and is this really a MUPUD project at face value? You could go either way. We could be sitting here and talking about a rezoning to residential, and then talk about how we have a land preservation to one side and C2 all around it. So is that fitting, and is that part of the master plan? No, it's mixed use core. We've got a 10,000 square foot space in this project that's going to be non-residential uses. It's going to have other services that are provided that will be available to residents of the region. But I think at the end of the day, if things go the way I would expect them to go, we're going to look up in a period of years, hopefully not that many of them, where we have a multiple phase redevelopment of Hazlet Village Square. And if in rearview mirror, I brought you what I hope that the Village Square is going to look like after those 3 phases are done, and then said, hey, this is the project that we're going to put in front of you, you would say this is a fantastic village-like setting that speaks to the PICA districts in the master plan. It's got a wide variety of housing, and commercial, and office, and all those things that I think we're probably going to see. In this particular case, it's a huge swath of land, and it's going to need to go in phases. So the proceeds from the sale of this land might precipitate the development of these other parcels. I had a conversation yesterday for 2 hours in my office with a developer who is interested in this middle parcel right here. So I know you don't know any of that, which is why I'm up here explaining kind of the strategy on how we think this all may go. And at face value, in a vacuum, some of your concerns are probably valid, but there is a longer play, I think, in place, and I think Hazlet deserves development of the Hazlet Village Square. And I think if this gets developed, even if it has a lot of residential to it, I suspect that there's a lot of peer pressure then on the commercial that's across the street that wants to capitalize on the density of the housing that is likely to occur here and is maybe going to occur here as well. So I really look at this whole Hazlet puzzle as an organism, and we need everything to do their work, and I think this is a fantastic project that I brought to this doorstep. And 3 weeks ago, it was a unanimous straw poll vote for approval, and so I guess I'm a little antsy about the about face, but I understand you're in your position for a reason. So I'm here for any other questions that you have, but I thought that that was a story that had to be told, so you understand the direction that we're going. If this doesn't go, we're back at square one. And we got to really, really consider what this is going to look like. We've had 11 years of a very dynamic environmental conditions for people to invest and lend and build. And we finally have someone here willing to spend a bunch of money to develop 10 acres. And it's the 10 acres furthest away from the big intersection. So there's an opportunity for real walkability, activated streetscapes. We got pathways that are proposed in the plan. There's a lot coming, and I think that this is a key component to it. I think our seniors deserve a modern and new housing choice, as Goal J of the Township Board speaks to. So I would just ask you to take strong consideration to go with where your gut was 3 weeks ago.
Thank you.
Sure.
Others? Commissioner Cordell?
I had a positive impression of the project back in December, and I still do. I would like to address some items with the applicant. Okay.
Hi.
Hi there. Thank you for coming in front of us again. Like I said, I think it's a positive. I think it would add something. can you address we can see that it has benefits for the future tenants. What would it bring to the population in general, or the people in that area, commercial-wise, amenity-wise? Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, so the building right now that we have planned would have the salon space that was mentioned, which would be run by a local business, so that would draw in business or residents from outside of the building itself. And then also it'll have an art studio space that will work with local artists to teach classes. They can hold, events and whatnot in the building. A lot of our other buildings, Kiwanis Club uses rooms. There's groups within the community that are looking for a space that's a little bigger, which this building can accommodate. So, they're drawn to that. Those are like the main reasons that I would say.
Okay. I imagine the dining room is for residents. Is that correct?
It's for residents or people that come visit.
Okay.
It's not, we're not out promoting it, but if somebody came in, they could eat there as well. So.
Is that true of the pub as well?
Yes.
Okay. And there's outdoor seating areas and so forth. So I was interested in that. Honestly, if we think about some things, I would like to see more robust commercial development, but you need the people to support that. It's kind of an interesting situation we find ourselves in the township. We've had how many student housing projects that have come under this umbrella of being mixed use? And now we're looking at people of 55 and older. So I think this has more to offer in some ways than some past projects we've reviewed and approved. So that aside, I am concerned about the parking. I'm glad that you've added a handful of additional parking spots, and you have a reserve area of 23 some odd parking. But I am concerned, what are the staff levels, numbers? What about visitor parking? Can you speak to the parking issue? I think when you came in front of us in December, you may have mentioned something about sharing parking facilities. And I'm not sure that this would really lend itself to that. I don't see a church in near proximity that could play with. But if you could address staffing levels, visitor parking and so forth, that would be helpful.
So typically what we see is it's about 0.7 parking spaces per unit. Staffing levels, I would say it's probably between 15 and 20 people. Visitors vary depending on time. But this parking that we've proposed fits with what we've seen at our other buildings in similar situations. That's why we're trying, I know you guys had concerns and we wanted to find spaces that we could add parking if it became a problem, which we don't see it becoming a problem, based on studies we've had done and the previous facilities that we've operated. One thing I do want to say is that one of the reasons we really do like the site, and Chris kind of spoke on, is that usually senior housing gets kind of put somewhere where there isn't anything around it. Mm-hmm. And so those people are forced to drive, or they can't really walk to things, where this is kind of exciting because there may not be anything there now for them. There's some stuff in the one building, but in the future, it could be a really awesome area for seniors and businesses that cater towards the senior population.
I like the opportunity because some of them are kind of pushed aside and not really integrated in the community. So I like, sorry, my voice is going. So I like where it's located and the potential that it has. I'm glad that you reoriented the building to face east. so that that additional area that can be developed, you'd have so many residents there who could make use of it. I see, at this point, I see no reason to change my mind, that I would recommend approval.
Commissioner Primo.
Yeah, I think we're also talking about a population that are, in fact, consumers. And if you introduce that much population into an area, I think businesses are going to be attracted to the potential for their consumption. And so I see this as a move towards encouraging more development rather than anything else. Having had a mother-in-law in a facility like that, she, her goal was to have her last check bounce. She spent right up till, and in her 90s, she was consuming. Her facility happened to be adjacent to a Myers and several other facilities that those people took full advantage of. And the beauty of it was walkable. And as they become less mobile in terms of automobiles, closer facilities, I think, lend themselves to some very positive possibilities. It also, when you think in terms of families visiting senior adults, to have then facilities available and close at hand to avail themselves to, I think if we tracked experience, we would. My hunch, and I don't have the statistics to prove this, but my hunch is that facilities like this do, in fact, encourage development, and that's the way development occurs. It occurs around population, and so you're providing a ready-made population of people who are going to want to consume, and in fact, who are retired and looking for places to consume. So I don't see any objection to this. I think it's a good use. I think it's a positive way to begin things in that particular area, and it's the cusp of growth rather than a hindrance in any way possible. So I'm fully supportive.
Commissioner Trezise.
I think I was, and probably other people on the commission, were so excited to see any proposal to develop in this area, as our initial reaction was, wow, this is a great idea. There are some concerns. I'm going to support it, but I question whether this type of development qualifies as an MUP. But the interpretation we've applied to other developments, and as was mentioned, some of the student developments, haven't required significant commercial development as part of the MUP in the past, and to suddenly impose that on this seems inappropriate. I think we ought to look at the statute or the ordinance itself to see what we do want under that umbrella. One concern I heard from a citizen had to do with one of the big draws in the township are the quality of our schools. This isn't going to develop any students. And if that entire corner were to develop this way, it would not necessarily be our ideal. But this is a piece of it, as Mr. Buck indicated. It's about a third of the property. It leaves 2/3 left to develop in a more intense development, more like the Okemos Village piece. And so I think it's a good first step. It does generate population in that area that could result in a greater impetus to develop the other parts of the site. So with reservations about the appropriateness of the zoning ordinance that we are applying, I will support this.
Commissioner Shrewsbury.
I share some of the reservations that Commissioner Trezise has, but I also think that having a willing developer who has a track record, having looked at some of the examples of the other developments that were shared with us, appear to be responsible and look like they have the potential to really drive future growth, I'll be supporting it.
I have a question for the applicant. Thank you for staying up there.
Yeah.
23 possible parking spaces, I'll call them, were shown on the updated plans. Is there any way to make those the real deal, to add 23 spaces to your total, bringing you up to 128?
As much as I don't want to, I could do it, yeah. We could add those as permanent spots on the
All right, because I
site
think,
plan. If that
and some of the others-
helps the,
yeah, some of the others have shared the concern that, the waiver being sought in terms of parking is significant, so that alleviates it to some extent. I myself have gone round and round on this as well, but I think this project as proposed is consistent with the way we have interpreted and basically applied the MUPUD ordinance in the past, so I continue to support it. So with that being, Commissioner Richards.
I guess I just want to make sure I'm not being misinterpreted and talking about potentially voting against this. I think it's a good project. I just wonder whether this is the right spot for it in the township, is my question. But I believe this is certainly a project that any community would love to have. I guess I just wonder if this is the right spot, considering, we've got a potential to develop bigger, the whole project.
Commissioner Henderson.
Yeah, I want to echo what Commissioner Richards mentioned a moment ago. I also just want to sort of contextualize why I've sort of rethought this. I took a look at our MUPUD ordinance, which I hadn't reviewed in some time, and I guess for better or for worse, I wasn't around when we've applied this much, the MUPUD ordinance, much beyond the village of Okemos. So my experience has been relatively circumscribed to that project, I think. But one of the key goals that's listed in the intent section of the MUPUD ordinance is to enhance incentives for investment by the ability to mix residential with commercial and office uses in the same development. Right, that's the whole idea of being mixed. And down a little bit further in the ordinance, it talks about the mixed-use MUPUD provides common areas and amenities for residents and the general public, including but not limited to gathering spaces and so on and so forth. I look at this project, and while I see the studio, I see the salon, it just doesn't feel like it's enough. It feels like a token nod in this direction, but it doesn't feel like it's, I'm not going to go to the cafeteria. I'm not going to go to the pub, right? I don't live there.
Motion to adopt the resolution recommending approval of special use permit 19181 with conditions. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Commissioner Cordell? Yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Trezise?
Yes.
Commissioner Primo?
Support.
Commissioner Henderson?
No.
Commissioner Shrewsbury?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Richards?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.